The Great Pyramids of Egypt. Just the thought may conjure up images of mummies, hieroglyphs, and pharaohs in drag. But are we being taught the real history of these mysterious megaliths? Come on a journey with me, and we'll explore the truth behind the pyramids. Throughout the sprawling deserts of Egypt, scattered along what was once the coast of the River Nile, lie over 100 giant stone pyramids. The largest of all, known as the Pyramid of Khufu, is comprised of some 2.3 million limestone blocks, ranging in size from 2 to 50 tons. Hidden inside is an ornate room known as the King's Chamber, with walls and ceilings made from even larger blocks of granite, an even harder type of stone. Building all this with Bronze Age tools and slave labor seems like a pretty steep task. So I did some digging, and it turns out it's literally impossible, especially with a workforce comprised mostly of cross-dressing fruitcakes. Yet, according to mainstream Egyptologists and school textbooks, that's exactly how it was done. No questions asked. Not only did these massive blocks have to be transported from various quarries, sometimes hundreds of miles away, by a bunch of men in makeup, but they had to be cut to precise measurements and placed with laser accuracy. Did the Egyptians really have the technology needed to cut granite? The only tools from ancient Egypt to ever be found were small bronze hand tools. In their drawings, they're depicted using these bronze tools to craft furniture out of wood and make jewelry. Never anything related to pyramids or even stone cutting, as that would be impossible for a bunch of weak losers like the Egyptians. In fact, what if I told you that pyramids were never depicted in any known hieroglyphs, and no hieroglyphs or mummies were ever found inside the pyramids? Could it be that the ancient Egyptians weren't the ones who built them at all? Dr. Robert Schoch proposes the theory that these structures are much older than we currently believe. One of his central arguments points to the erosion on the Great Sphinx. According to the official narrative, this erosion was caused by wind and sand. It had to be, because they believe that this structure was built by Egyptians circa 2700 BC. According to Schoch, any geologist not blinded by his own hubris can clearly discern that this erosion was caused not by wind, but water. For this to be true, that would mean the Sphinx is thousands of years older than we currently think, having survived through a cataclysmic flood. But I propose a third theory. I believe that these monuments were weathered not by water or the sands of time, but the sands of time travel. Occam's razor tells us that this architecture is simply too far advanced to be the work of slave labor some 5,000 plus years ago. It had to be the work of a master architect, a mason. But who? After countless hours of research, I found myself exhausted and defeated. I encountered dead end after dead end and was left with more questions than answers. That is, until one day when I was counting my money. On the front, I noticed our old friend, the 33rd degree Freemason George Washington. But when I flipped the dollar bill over, I noticed something that no one has ever noticed before. It seems that President Washington left us a clue, what I now believe to be a sort of blueprint on how to go about building the pyramids. I have deduced that he planned to send these blueprints into the future to ensure that time travelers would travel back to prehistoric times with their advanced technology and carry out his instructions. But is a little diagram really enough to get his point across? I did a little digging, and upon closer inspection, I noticed something out of the ordinary. That's it, right there. detailed written instructions to accompany the visual plan. Unfortunately, they were written in Latin. That was done intentionally to confuse us. I have taken it upon myself to not only decode these messages, but also interpret them. Let's take them one by one. Annuit coeptis, please accept our undertaking. In other words, we have undertaken this difficult task of designing the Great Pyramids. Please build them. This makes sense. After all, they are masons. Now for the instructions themselves. E pluribus unum. Out of many come one. In other words, use many limestone blocks to create one structure as pictured. Presumably, George Washington and his contemporaries predicted the advent of technologies such as diamond-tipped drills, laser levels, and cranes, and thus expected the future generations to have the means to take on such a massive project. The very existence of the pyramids are proof that they were correct. You may now be thinking, the pyramids already exist. Why would we have to give them instructions coming from the past, our present? What a stupid question. In order to prevent a sort of temporal wake multiverse paradox, the Freemasons have taken it upon themselves to ensure that this message does not get lost before humanity is ready to carry out the plans. If that were to happen, they would have never been built, even though they already have, causing quantum entanglement, which would lead to a cataclysmic shifting of Earth's magnetic poles, wiping out all life as we know it. So how did Washington ensure that this message didn't get lost? December 23rd, 1913. A group of Freemasons set out to create what's now known as the Federal Reserve. Their goal? To replace our former monetary system with what they called fiat currency, a paper money that no longer needed to be backed by physical gold, but rather was assigned artificial value. In 1971, this plan was accomplished. Switching to fiat currency serves two main purposes. Number one, untethering the dollar from any asset with intrinsic value allows them to print a nearly infinite supply of these so-called dollars, trillions every year. In fact, 40% of US dollars that have ever existed were printed just last year in 2020. The government then uses this newly printed money to make minimum payments on its trillions of dollars in debt. This ensures that the money lands directly in the hands of some of the world's most wealthy and powerful people, so that these blueprints can become widespread throughout the earth. Critics have said this causes extreme inflation and economic depression, but they don't understand the existential threat that is being solved by printing this fake money. The second purpose of this artificial value system is that it ensures these dollars would rarely, if ever, be lost or destroyed by those who acquired them, as long as they still believed it carried value. These two attributes all but guaranteed these plans would survive into a future time when mankind will have had the technology to create such amazing monuments as the pyramids and the Great Sphinx, using advanced futuristic cranes, jackhammers, dynamite, power drills, and diamond-edged saws. Thank you, Federal Reserve, and thank you, Freemasons.